If you gave me a reason, Lord, I will praise you. Without a reason, I will still praise you.
Let's quickly dispense some myths about Africa. In York is one of the oldest discovered Africans in Britain, the Bangled Lady, as she is known. She was from sub-Saharan Africa and a merchant in her own right. African women control markets in Africa and the West Indies to feed their families and communities. Africa has always been poor, really? Well, explain Mansa Musa, recognized as the richest man in the world ever, a benefactor of one of the world's first universities, Timbuktu. In the Middle Ages, there were up to 25,000 students. Africa was just a land of slaves. Yes, slavery existed, but not in the colonial plantocracy sense. You were not a slave for life. Jaja was a slave who became King Jaja of Opobo. He controlled palm oil very well. He lived in a land with a history of trade, but the British could not negotiate on his level. So they used 19th century gunboat diplomacy to get the trade deal that they wanted. And they exiled him to the West Indies, where he died. As we commemorate 5 decades since the demise of David Oluwale, bear in mind that when he arrived in England in 1949, it was only 5 decades after the destruction of Benin City in Nigeria by the British. To prove Africa was uncivilized, they had to destroy evidence of civilization. They stole invaluable items which can be found in private collections and the British Museum. And what they couldn't carry, they destroyed. As we mourn for France and the loss of a section of Notre Dame to flames, consider a whole ancient city, once more advanced than anywhere in Europe, with 2-tiered structures and street lighting, and an amazing palace where the British lit a fire that burned the whole city for 2 whole days. Headingley and other areas of the country flourished with new trade advantages of colonial rule after the 1886 Berlin Conference. You can see many aspiring houses with the date 1896 in Headingley, and this is a time of a new aspiration, because when you can create trade deals with almost 100% returns, you can afford to be very confident. So the Oluwales of Africa were the brave ones, the defiant ones, the once proud and mighty rulers of their own destiny, determined not to be minced into insignificance by recently arrived deviants to the table of civilization. David did not have to be impressed with them to demand opportunities denied. He wanted to provide his mother with a decent home.
Owner of the ocean, queen of water, I throw a salute, I greet you, thanking you for everything you've done. David Oluwale came across the sea safely. The vessel known as Temple Star brought him to this island shores. Following his dreams, he took transport with your support, a bountiful lady of the ocean.
My own biological father, Headley, was a bus conductor in Leeds after working on the railways 3 years. His younger brother, by 2 years, Evan, was a builder. Together, they helped build and keep Leeds ticking over. Headley died when I was 8 in 1970. He would have seen Oluwale in the city centre, streets, and even socializing when he was a bus conductor. My mother was a seamstress at Executex and other textile factories. My stepdad was a highly skilled cabinet maker and furniture restorer. When they left Jamaica, there was no economic scheme left by the British colonialists to assist Jamaica's development after centuries of enslavement. In fact, on August 1st, 1833, ships arrived from India with indentured servants to ensure the misery of Africans in the West Indies would continue. and unemployment ravaged the islands for decades. So after World War II, when Britain called on its empire to assist in their plight to rebuild a crumbling infrastructure built by the economics of slavery and colonialism to begin with, the call was answered, but not out of bitterness or spite, but of confidence in self-worth. The problem was the British were not ready. They were not educated on their own privileges and where it came from. And those that were also resentful that their superiority was being reduced by having to treat savages and slaves as equals. Tarzan and Carry On Up the Jungle, Gonga Din and Lawrence of Arabia on the telly, in films, in books, all media was about supremacy, which kept the nation going. Until that too was challenged, and your British John Bull was feeling he would be forgotten. He made a stand with Oluwale, and they're making a stand with Brexit today. Between 1949 and 1953, David was mainly living and working in Leeds. The exact dates of each job and residence aren't known, but we do have some dates. He had lots of friends among the small number of West Africans in Leeds at this time. Statistics show that there were 45 black people from Africa in Leeds in 1951.
David Oluwale sailed across the sea safely. The vessel known as Temple Bar brought him to this island shores. Following his dreams, he took transport with your support, oh bountiful lady of the ocean.
Although there are various dates associated with David's birth, it is believed that David was born on the 8th of September 1931 in Lagos, Nigeria. As we have heard in the song, David stowed away on the MV Temple Bar, which left Apapa Wharf, Lagos, for Hull.
Àwọn tọrọ ìlọsíwájú lọ́wọ́ ẹ, prosperity olókun, prosperity olókun.
David was arrested on arrival in Hull on September the 3rd, 1949, and charged under the Merchant Shipping Act. He was sentenced at Hull Police Court to 28 days in Armley Jail, Leeds. On the 3rd of October 1949, David was released from Armley Jail. He would spend most of the next 20 years in Leeds. His first address was Well Close Place, Little London, Leeds 2, number 11 on your map near the top. Jumping forward between June and October 1964, this address resurfaces in David's life, living in Faith Lodge, a hostel for ex-alcoholics and ex-mental patients and ex-convicts, linked to St. George's Crypt. Donald Patterson, the warden, described him as a timid little man who had language difficulties and was simple-minded. Ironically, in September 1962, PC Dave Stanton found David sleeping in the doorway of Maple Denby and Spinks' furniture shop over across on Albion Street. A few weeks later, asked why he wasn't sleeping at St. George's Crypt, the shelter for the homeless in Leeds, he told PC Stanton that they gave him a hard time there because of his color. So sleeping in doorways was one of the only options left open to David. And one of the most popular doorways that David could be found is in John Peters' shop, which was at that location there, which is now Easy Hotel and Costa Coffee.